Commander Sarah Chen stood at the viewing deck of Nexus Prime, watching ships from across the galaxy dock at the massive space station. The sight never got old, even after 5 years serving as Earth's primary representative to the Galactic Council. Ships that looked like floating crystals belonged to the Veil Collective. The dark, angular vessels were from the Korthak Empire. Sleek silver ships came from the Zephyrians, the oldest and most respected species in the Council. Then there were the human ships. Compared to the others, they looked simple and rough. Metal hulls with basic designs that focused on function over beauty. Sarah often heard whispered comments about human technology being primitive but charming. It used to bother her, but not anymore. Humans had earned their place here through hard work and dedication. 50 years ago, when the Galactic Council first made contact with Earth, humanity was still recovering from their Third World War. The aliens found a planet covered in radiation and filled with suspicious, war-torn people. Most Council species expected humans to destroy themselves within a decade. Instead, humanity surprised everyone. The medical technology humans developed during their wars turned out to save millions of lives across the galaxy. Human doctors could regrow limbs and cure diseases that had puzzled alien scientists for centuries. The farming methods Earth used to feed its population helped end hunger on 12 different worlds. When territorial disputes broke out between older species, human peacekeepers somehow managed to find solutions that worked for everyone. Sarah walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime toward the council chambers. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved around her. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, others floated, crawled, or moved in ways that still confused her. After 50 years of contact, humans were no longer the newest species in the council, but they were still treated like the youngest children in a family of adults. The council had 47 seats total. Earth held 2 of them, which was actually generous considering their short membership. The Zephyrians held 8 seats, having been founding members over 1 million years ago. The Korthak Empire had 6 seats. Even the Crystalline Confederation, who rarely spoke during meetings, had 4 seats. Sarah entered the main chamber where today's session was already beginning. The room was enormous, with seats arranged in circles that went up toward a domed ceiling. Each species had their own section designed for their specific needs. The aquatic depths had water-filled pods. The gas-breathing nebula folk had special atmosphere containers. Humans sat in simple chairs that looked almost embarrassing next to the elaborate setups around them. High Counselor Vextar of the Zephyrians was speaking. His people looked like tall, thin humans with pale blue skin and large black eyes. They were considered the wisest species in the galaxy, having solved problems of war, hunger, and disease long before other species even developed space travel. The harvest reports from the Outer Rim territories show excellent progress, Vextar said in his calm, measured voice. The techniques shared by our human colleagues have increased food production by 30% across 17 worlds. Sarah felt a small surge of pride. Human agricultural methods were being used throughout the galaxy now. Crop rotation, selective breeding, and soil management that seemed basic to humans had revolutionized farming for species that had relied on artificial nutrients for thousands of years. We should also recognize the human medical teams working in the Tau sector, added Counselor Zhek from the Armored Coalition. Her people looked like walking tanks with thick metallic skin. The plague affecting the gentle singers has been completely eliminated thanks to human antiviral research. More murmurs of approval filled the chamber. Sarah nodded politely as other council members looked toward the human section. This was how most sessions went. Humans would present their latest discoveries or solutions. Other species would praise their creativity and determination, and then the real political discussions would begin about things. Humans were still considered too inexperienced to fully understand. Now we move to the matter of expanding the trade routes through the Helix Nebula, Vextar announced. This requires careful consideration of territorial boundaries established by the Treaty of 7 Stars. Sarah pulled up the relevant documents on her datapad. The Treaty of 7 Stars was signed 300,000 years before humans even existed. It dealt with navigation rights through areas of space that contained valuable resources. Discussions like this could go on for hours, with references to agreements and precedents that predated human civilization by millions of years. As the debate continued, Sarah found herself thinking about Earth. Messages from home took 3 days to reach Nexus Prime. Even with the fastest quantum communication arrays, Her last report from President Martinez described continuing reconstruction efforts in the former war zones. It was hard to believe that the same species now helping solve galactic problems had been dropping nuclear weapons on each other just decades ago. The Zephyrians often mentioned this during private conversations. They found human development fascinating and troubling at the same time. Most species took millions of years to develop from primitive warfare to galactic citizenship. Humans had made the jump in less than a century. Some council members worried that humans were advancing too quickly, but Vextar always defended Earth's membership. Young species bring fresh perspectives, he would say. Humans see solutions that escape those of us who have grown comfortable with old ways of thinking. Sarah was pulled back to the present when her communication device buzzed with an urgent message. Dr. James Park, leading the archaeological team on Kepler 442b, was requesting immediate contact. The message was marked with the highest priority codes. She quietly excused herself from the session and found a private communication booth outside the main chamber. Dr. Park's face appeared on the screen, and Sarah could immediately see that something was wrong. His usually calm expression showed obvious stress and worry. "Commander Chen, we need to talk immediately," he said without the usual greetings, not over standard channels. "Can you arrange a secure quantum link?" "What's wrong, James?" Sarah asked, though she was already setting up the encrypted connection. "We found something on this planet, something that changes everything we thought we knew about the Council. Sarah, you need to see this yourself, but I can't risk sending it through normal communication systems." Sarah felt a cold sensation in her stomach. "Are you in danger?" "I don't think so, but what we discovered, if this information is correct, then humanity might be in more danger than we ever imagined. The ruins here, they contain records of other species that joined the Council." "What kind of records?" Dr. Park looked around nervously before responding. "Records of species that joined the Council and then disappeared." "Not naturally, Sarah, they were eliminated. And the pattern suggests that newer species are brought in. Their technologies are harvested and then they're quietly removed from the galaxy." Sarah's blood ran cold. "James, are you absolutely certain about this?" "The evidence is overwhelming. We found shipping manifests, communication logs, detailed plans. Sarah, I think we need to prepare for the possibility that Earth is next on their list." The communication ended, leaving Sarah staring at a blank screen. Around her, the normal activities of Nexus Prime continued. Aliens walked past the booth, discussing trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Everything looked the same as it had an hour ago, but suddenly the entire galaxy felt different. Sarah realized she was gripping the edges of the communication console so hard her knuckles had turned white. If Dr. Park was right, then humanity's greatest achievement, joining the Galactic Council, might actually be the first step toward their extinction. Dr. James Park had been studying dead worlds for 15 years, but Kepler 442b was different from anything he had ever seen. The planet showed signs of having once supported a thriving civilization, but there were no survivors, no descendants, and no records in the Galactic Council's extensive databases about who had lived there. The archaeological team had been working for 3 months, carefully excavating what appeared to be a massive library complex. The technology was advanced, far beyond what most species achieved when they first joined the Council. Yet according to all official records, this world had been empty for over 50,000 years. "Dr. Park, you need to see this," called Maria Santos, his lead linguist. She was standing beside a newly uncovered section of crystalline data storage. The crystals were still functional, their surfaces glowing with soft blue light. James made his way through the excavation site. His team had been working in shifts around the clock since discovering the first intact data crystals 3 days ago. What they were finding challenged everything they thought they knew about galactic history. "I've managed to decode another section," Maria said, her voice tight with concern. "This one contains what appears to be official communications between this species and the Galactic Council." James looked at the translation appearing on Maria's portable screen. The text described trade negotiations, cultural exchange programs, and technology sharing agreements. It was exactly the kind of material you would expect to find from a species that had recently joined the Council. "What's the date on these communications?" James asked. "That's the problem," Maria replied. "According to the timestamp, these messages were sent 52,000 years ago. But look at this." She pulled up another set of files. These showed medical records, population statistics, and resource surveys. The numbers painted a picture of a healthy, growing civilization with approximately 8 billion inhabitants spread across their home world and 12 colony planets. They were thriving, James said quietly. So what happened to them? I found that answer too, Maria said, her face pale. Keep reading. The next set of files were different in tone. They contained communications from Galactic Council representatives discussing what they called population management protocols. The language was clinical and cold, describing the inhabitants of this world as subjects rather than citizens. James read through message after message detailing the systematic harvesting of this species' technological innovations. Their medical advances were copied and distributed to other council worlds. Their energy production methods were studied and replicated. Their agricultural techniques were tested and improved upon. Then came the final phase of documents, orders for biological weapons specifically designed to target this species' genetic structure, shipping manifests for deployment systems, progress reports on what the council called the cleansing operation. They were murdered, James said, his voice barely above a whisper. The entire species was eliminated after the council took everything useful from them. Maria nodded grimly. But there's more. I found references to other worlds, other species that went through the same process. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was standard procedure. Over the next several hours, James and his team uncovered a horrifying pattern. The crystalline archives contained detailed records of dozens of species that had joined the Galactic Council over the past million years. Each followed the same progression: contact, membership, integration, technological harvesting, and finally elimination. The methods varied. Some species were destroyed by engineered plagues that looked like natural diseases. Others faced economic collapse when their trade agreements were suddenly canceled, leading to societal breakdown. A few were eliminated through carefully orchestrated wars with neighboring species. Look at this timeline, said Dr. Chen Wei, the team's historian. He had been cross-referencing the archived data with official council records. Every single one of these species contributed major technological or cultural advances to the galaxy before disappearing. James studied the pattern. They're brought in specifically for their innovations. The council identifies species with unique developments, invites them to join, extracts their knowledge, and then removes them before they can become a threat to the established order. Dr. Park, Maria called from across the excavation site, I found something about the selection criteria. The council has specific guidelines for choosing target species. James ran over to where Maria was working with a massive crystal formation that appeared to be some kind of central processing unit. The data flowing across her screen made his blood run cold. The criteria were precise. Species had to be advanced enough to contribute meaningful innovations, but young enough to be easily manipulated. They needed to show rapid technological development, suggesting they would continue advancing quickly after joining the council. Most importantly, they had to demonstrate what the documents called aggressive expansion tendencies that could eventually threaten established council members. James, Maria said quietly, these criteria describe humanity perfectly. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Humans had joined the council 50 years ago. They had contributed revolutionary medical technology, agricultural innovations, and proven themselves capable of rapid advancement. They had also shown the exact kind of aggressive expansion that the council considered threatening, having gone from primitive warfare to space travel in less than a century. We need to find out how long the typical cycle takes, James said urgently. How long do species usually survive after joining the council? Dr. Chen was already working on that question. After an hour of analysis, he found the answer. The average time from admission to elimination is 73 years. The shortest was 32 years for a species that advanced too quickly. The longest was 115 years for a species that took time to develop their most valuable technologies. Humanity has been in the council for 50 years, Maria said. We're right in the middle of the typical timeline. James began searching through the archives for any mention of current operations. What he found made him immediately contact Commander Chen on Nexus Prime. The archives contained references to the human project with projected completion, dates within the next several years. The documents described human medical technology as extremely valuable for widespread implementation and human agricultural methods as essential for food security expansion. There were detailed studies of human psychology, biology, and social structures. The Council had been preparing for humanity's elimination almost from the moment Earth joined. "We have to warn Earth," Maria said. "The government needs to know what's coming." "We need more than warnings," James replied. "We need proof that can't be dismissed or covered up." The team worked frantically to copy every relevant file from the crystalline archives. The evidence was overwhelming. Shipping records for bioweapons designed to target human DNA, communication logs discussing optimal timing for population adjustment, and detailed plans for distributing human technology after the species was eliminated. One document particularly stood out. It was a recent communication from High Counselor Vextar himself, discussing the need to accelerate the human timeline due to their unprecedented rate of advancement. The Zephyrian leader, who had always seemed like humanity's strongest supporter, was actively planning their destruction. "Look at this economic analysis," Dr. Chen said, pointing to a series of financial projections. "They've already calculated the cost-benefit ratio of eliminating humanity versus allowing them to continue developing. The decision has been made." James realized they were looking at evidence of the largest genocide in galactic history, repeated over and over for millions of years. Every species that had ever joined the Council, with hopes of peaceful coexistence, had been systematically murdered after their usefulness was exhausted. The most chilling discovery came in the final hours of their investigation. Maria found a section of the archives that contained what appeared to be a trophy room of sorts. Digital recreations of extinct species, samples of their destroyed worlds, and detailed descriptions of their final moments. "They keep records of everyone they've killed," she said, her voice shaking. "Millions of intelligent species, entire civilizations, all eliminated to maintain the Council's power structure." James looked at the evidence they had gathered. Terabytes of data proving that the Galactic Council was nothing more than a sophisticated system for harvesting the innovations of younger species before destroying them. Humanity had been marked for death from the moment they achieved space travel. "We need to get this information to Commander Chen immediately," he said. "But we also need to be prepared for the possibility that even with this evidence, the Council won't let humanity simply leave peacefully." "What do you mean?" Maria asked. "I mean that once we present this evidence, we'll be forcing their hand. They'll have to accelerate their timeline or risk losing control of the situation entirely. We might have just started a countdown to humanity's extinction." James initiated the emergency communication protocol to contact Nexus Prime. As the quantum link established connection, he realized that the next few hours would determine whether humanity had any chance of survival or if they had just discovered their death sentence too late. "Commander," Sarah Chen had spent 3 sleepless days reviewing the evidence. Dr. Park's team had transmitted from Kepler 442b. The data was undeniable, horrifying, and completely changed everything she thought she knew about the Galactic Council. Every document, every communication log, every shipping manifest painted the same picture. Humanity was next on the Council's elimination list. Now she stood outside the main Council chamber, carrying the evidence that would either save her species or doom them. The crystalline data storage device felt heavy in her hand, containing proof of millions of years of systematic genocide disguised as galactic cooperation. Sarah had requested an emergency session of the full Council, claiming to have discovered critical information affecting galactic security. High Counselor Vextar had granted the request immediately, which now seemed ominous rather than helpful. He probably knew exactly what she had found. The chamber was full when Sarah entered. All 47 species were represented, their various forms of seating and atmosphere controls creating the familiar alien landscape she had grown accustomed to over 5 years. But now, looking at these beings she had considered colleagues and friends, Sarah saw them differently. She saw predators who had been patiently waiting for the right moment to strike. "Commander Chen," Vextar said in his calm, measured voice, "you requested this emergency session. Please present your findings." Sarah walked to the center of the chamber, where a holographic projection system would allow all council members to view her evidence simultaneously. Her hands were steady as she inserted the data crystal, but her heart was racing. "Honored council members," she began, 3 days ago, Our archaeological team on Kepler 442b made a discovery that affects the safety and security of every species in this chamber. The first hologram appeared, showing the ruins of the ancient civilization Dr. Park's team had excavated. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as species recognized technology that seemed familiar yet was, supposedly, from a world that had been empty for 50,000 years. This world was inhabited by an advanced species that achieved space travel, approximately 52,000 years ago, Sarah continued. According to their records, they were contacted by the Galactic Council and invited to join our peaceful alliance. She activated the next series of holograms, showing the communication logs between the extinct species and various council representatives. The messages detailed the same process humanity had experienced: gradual integration, technology sharing, and cultural exchange. These beings contributed significant advances in energy production and medical technology to the galactic community, Sarah said, watching the faces around her carefully. Some species looked genuinely surprised by the information. Others seemed uncomfortable, as if they already knew what was coming. The Zephyrian delegation remained completely calm, showing no reaction to evidence of their species' communications with the extinct civilization. High Counselor Vexitar's large black eyes focused on Sarah, with what she now recognized as predatory patience. However, Sarah continued, the story does not end with peaceful cooperation. The next holograms showed the later communications, the ones discussing population management and resource optimization. The clinical language describing intelligent beings as expendable resources created an uncomfortable silence in the chamber. This species was systematically eliminated after their technological contributions were harvested and distributed throughout the council, Sarah said. Bioweapons were specifically designed to target their genetic structure. The operation was planned and executed by this very council. Now the reactions were more obvious. Several species began agitated discussions among their delegations. The aquatic depths created bubbling patterns in their water-filled pods that Sarah had learned indicated extreme distress. The crystalline confederation's representatives actually dimmed their natural luminescence, which was equivalent to gasping in shock. But the older, more established species remained calm. The Zephyrians, the Korthak Empire, the Nebula Folk, and a dozen others showed no surprise at all. They had known this information already. Furthermore, Sarah pressed on, the archives contain evidence that this was not an isolated incident. Dozens of species have been eliminated using the same methods over the past 1,000,000 years. She displayed the timeline Dr. Chen had compiled, showing the systematic destruction of species after species. Each had followed the same pattern: contact, integration, exploitation, elimination. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Among the current active files, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger despite her fear, we found extensive documentation of something called the Human Project. This includes detailed plans for the elimination of my species, scheduled to begin within the next several years. The chamber erupted in chaos. Multiple species began speaking at once, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds, lights, and chemical signals. Some delegations appeared genuinely shocked and outraged. Others seemed to be trying to distance themselves from the information. A few, Sarah noticed, remained completely silent. High Counselor Vextar raised one pale hand and the chamber gradually fell silent. When he spoke, his voice carried the same calm authority it always had, but now Sarah heard the coldness beneath it. Commander Chen, he said, you have presented interesting historical information. However, I am curious about your interpretation of these events. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. My interpretation? High Counselor, the evidence shows that the Council has been systematically murdering entire species for millions of years. This isn't interpretation. This is documented fact, Vextar nodded slowly. Yes, it is documented fact. The question is whether you view this as a problem that needs to be solved or simply as information you were not previously aware of. The casual admission hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're not denying it. Why would I deny established Council policy? Vextar asked. The procedures you have discovered have maintained galactic stability for over 1,000,000 years. They are not a secret among the senior council members. They are simply not discussed with junior species who lack the perspective to understand their necessity. Sarah looked around the chamber, finally understanding which species had known and which had been kept in the dark. The newer council members, those who had joined within the last 100,000 years, looked as shocked as she felt. The ancient species that had been founding members watched the proceedings with calm acceptance. "You murder entire civilizations," Sarah said, her voice rising. "Billions of innocent beings." "We maintain order," Vextar corrected. "Young species are enthusiastic and innovative, but they are also unpredictable and potentially dangerous. The galaxy cannot afford to have dozens of rapidly advancing civilizations competing for resources and territory. History shows that such situations inevitably lead to galactic wars that destroy everything." Councillor Zek from the Armored Coalition leaned forward. "The solution is elegant and merciful. Promising species are invited to contribute their unique innovations to the galactic community. Their discoveries benefit everyone and ensure their legacy continues even after they are gone." "After they are murdered," Sarah said flatly. "After they are prevented from becoming a threat," Vextar replied. "Commander Chen, your species has contributed remarkable advances in medicine and agriculture. These innovations have already saved millions of lives across the galaxy. Humanity's legacy will be eternal, even if humanity itself is temporary." Sarah realized with growing horror that this was not a conspiracy or a secret program. This was simply how the galaxy worked. The ancient species had created a system where they remained permanently in power while harvesting the innovations of younger civilizations. "You've been planning this since the day you contacted Earth," she said, naturally. "The preliminary surveys identified humanity as an ideal candidate for the program. Rapid technological development, aggressive expansion tendencies, and significant innovative potential. Your species met all the criteria perfectly. And if we refuse to cooperate?" Vextar's expression didn't change, but something in his voice became even colder. "Commander Chen, you seem to misunderstand the situation. This is not a negotiation or a choice being offered to your species. This is simply an explanation of established policy that you happened to discover somewhat earlier than anticipated." The reality of the situation crashed over Sarah like a wave. The Council wasn't offering humanity options. They were simply explaining what was going to happen regardless of any resistance Earth might offer. "However," Vextar continued, "your early discovery does create some timing complications. We had planned to allow humanity several more years to complete their most promising research projects. But since you now possess this information, we must adjust our schedule." He touched a control on his seat, and the chamber's main display changed to show a star map with Earth, and all human colonies marked in red. Commander Sarah Chen walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime with the weight of her species' extinction pressing down on her shoulders. The Council had given humanity 72 hours to choose between willing cooperation and forced annihilation. Around her, aliens continued their normal activities, unaware that they had just witnessed the casual planning of genocide. Sarah reached her private quarters and immediately activated the quantum communication array. The connection to Earth would take several minutes to establish, but she needed to contact President Martinez and the Joint Chiefs of Staff before the Council fleets reached human space. While waiting for the connection, Sarah thought about the past 5 years. Every friendly conversation with Vextar, every cultural exchange program, every moment of pride when human innovations helped solve galactic problems. All of it had been part of a carefully orchestrated harvesting operation. Humanity had been cattle being fattened for slaughter. The communication screen flickered to life, showing President Martinez in the White House Situation Room. Behind him, Sarah could see General Morrison, Admiral Chen, no relation despite the shared name, and Director Walsh from the intelligence agency. "Sarah," President Martinez said, his face immediately showing concern at her expression. "What's wrong?" "Mr. President, I need you to activate Protocol 7 immediately," Sarah said without preamble. "Full implementation. Every asset, every station, every ship." The room behind President Martinez went completely silent. Protocol 7 was humanity's most classified contingency plan, known only to a handful of people in each generation. It had been created after Earth's Third World War, when the survivors realized that humanity's greatest weakness was their tendency to trust others who seemed peaceful. "Sarah, Protocol 7 is for the complete elimination of an existential threat to human survival," General Morrison said, leaning forward. "Are you certain about this?" The Galactic Council has been systematically murdering every species that joins them after harvesting their technology, Sarah said quickly. We found evidence of dozens of extinct civilizations. They've been doing this for over 1 million years, and humanity is next on their list. Council fleets are already moving toward our worlds. President Martinez closed his eyes for a moment. How long do we have? Less than 72 hours. They're giving us a choice between willing extinction and forced extinction. Those are the only options they're offering. Admiral Chen spoke up. Sarah, even if we activate Protocol 7, we're talking about 45 advanced civilizations with combined fleets that outnumber us thousands to one. The tactical situation is impossible, which is exactly why we spent 50 years preparing for this moment, Sarah replied. Mr. President, you need to send the command now. Every second we delay gives them more time to position their forces. President Martinez looked at the others in the room. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity, and now they faced the ultimate test of whether their preparations had been sufficient. What's the current status of Project Broken Arrow? He asked Director Walsh. All installations are operational and fully charged, Walsh replied. We have quantum disruption arrays in position around every major human settlement, including the ones the Council doesn't know about. The technology is ready for deployment. Sarah felt a surge of hope. Project Broken Arrow was humanity's ultimate weapon, developed in secret over 5 decades using technology that humanity had discovered early in their galactic exploration, but never shared with the Council. While appearing to integrate peacefully, human scientists had been studying every alien species, mapping their weaknesses, and preparing for betrayal. The quantum disruption technology could collapse the molecular bonds of any known material, effectively turning solid objects into expanding clouds of individual atoms. It bypassed all conventional shielding and could affect targets across vast distances. Most importantly, it worked on biological tissue as well as metal and composite materials. The targeting data is already loaded into all systems, General Morrison added. We've been tracking Council fleet movements and military installations since the day we joined. If we activate Broken Arrow, we can eliminate their ability to threaten Earth within minutes. President Martinez looked directly at Sarah through the communication link. You're absolutely certain about the threat? I have documentation proving they've done this to dozens of species before us, Sarah said. And High Counselor Vextar admitted everything openly. He said it was simply established Council policy. They're not hiding it anymore because they don't think we can do anything about it. Then they're about to learn something about human nature, President Martinez said grimly. He turned to his staff. Gentlemen, we always knew this day might come. Our ancestors survived 3 world wars by being prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. Today we find out if we prepared well enough. The President moved to a secure terminal and began entering the authorization codes for Protocol 7. Each member of the Joint Chiefs added their own codes, and Director Walsh provided the final intelligence authorization. The system required unanimous consent from all senior leadership to prevent accidental activation. Sarah, President Martinez said, we're going to transmit the activation command to all human military installations and hidden facilities simultaneously. Once this starts, there's no going back. Are you ready? Sarah thought about Dr. Park and his team on Kepler 442b, surrounded by the ruins of a civilization that had trusted the Council and paid the ultimate price. She thought about the billions of humans living peaceful lives on Earth and the colonies, unaware that their extinction had been planned from the moment aliens first made contact. I'm ready, Mr. President. President Martinez pressed the final authorization key. Across human space, quantum communication arrays activated simultaneously, transmitting a simple encrypted message to every human military installation, research station, and hidden weapons platform. The message contained just 2 words, Broken Arrow. On Earth, Admiral Chen watched as confirmation signals began appearing on his tactical display. Military installations that officially didn't exist reported ready status. Research stations disguised as civilian facilities confirmed weapon systems online. Most importantly, the hidden quantum disruption arrays positioned throughout space showed full operational status. All stations report ready, Admiral Chen announced. Targeting data is locked on all Council fleet positions and military installations. Estimated time to target elimination, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Sarah watched through her quarters viewing port as the first signs of the operation became visible. In the distance, she could see Council ships beginning to maneuver into attack formations around Nexus Prime. They were positioning themselves to ensure no human ships could escape to warn Earth. Initiate Broken Arrow, President Martinez ordered. The quantum disruption arrays activated simultaneously across the galaxy. The effect was invisible at first, but within seconds, Sarah watched the Council ships outside Nexus Prime simply cease to exist. Their molecular bonds collapsed and the massive vessels became expanding clouds of their constituent atoms. My God, Admiral Chen whispered as his displays showed the results. It worked. Every Council fleet in human space is gone. Their home fleet installations are gone. Their military production facilities are gone. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and horror as she realized what humanity had just accomplished. In less than 5 minutes, they had eliminated the military might of 45 advanced civilizations simultaneously. The technology they had kept secret for 50 years had proven devastatingly effective. Her communication device buzzed with an incoming message from Nexus Prime's emergency broadcast system. High Counselor Vexitar's voice filled her quarters, but now it carried panic instead of calm authority. All stations, this is High Counselor Vexitar. We are under attack by unknown forces using weapons of unprecedented capability. Our entire fleet has been destroyed. I repeat, our entire military force has been eliminated. All surviving Council ships retreat to emergency positions and await further orders. Sarah activated her own communication system and broadcast on all Council frequencies. High Counselor Vexitar, this is Commander Sarah Chen. The unknown forces you're referring to are humanity. We spent 50 years preparing for your betrayal. The silence that followed lasted almost a full minute before Vexitar responded. That is impossible. Human technology is decades behind Council standards. You do not possess weapons capable of this level of destruction. You never asked us what technology we possessed, Sarah replied. You assumed we had shared everything with the Council, just like all the other species you murdered. But humans learned long ago never to reveal all their capabilities to potential enemies. How did you know? Vexitar asked, his voice now showing something Sarah had never heard from him before. Fear. We found the ruins of your previous victims, Sarah said. We know about the systematic genocide you've been conducting for millions of years. We know about the plan to eliminate humanity, and now we've shown you what happens when you underestimate a species that spent most of its history fighting wars. As Sarah spoke, her tactical display showed human fleets emerging from hidden positions throughout the galaxy. 6 months after the activation of Broken Arrow, Commander Sarah Chen stood in the same Council chamber on Nexus Prime. But everything had changed. The seats that once held representatives of 47 species now hosted delegates from over 200 different civilizations. Many of these species had been hiding in remote systems for thousands of years, terrified of attracting the Council's attention. The Galactic Council as it had existed for 1 million years was gone. In its place, humanity had established what they called the Galactic Federation, a truly representative government where every species had an equal voice regardless of their age or technological development. Sarah looked out at the diverse gathering before her. The former Council species that had survived humanity's response sat alongside beings who had never been allowed to participate in galactic politics. Some species were so advanced they had transcended physical form, while others had only recently achieved space travel. For the first time in galactic history, they were all equals. The reconstruction efforts on Zephyr Prime are proceeding ahead of schedule, reported Dr. Elena Vasquez, humanity's new director of interspecies relations. The Zephyrian survivors have been surprisingly cooperative in helping establish the new government structures. Sarah nodded. The aftermath of Broken Arrow had been swift and decisive. Within hours of the quantum disruption strikes, every major Council military installation had been eliminated. The ancient species that had controlled the galaxy for millions of years suddenly found themselves defenseless against the humans they had planned to murder. But humanity had surprised everyone, including themselves, with what happened next. What about the war crimes tribunals? Asked Admiral Chen, who had been promoted to head the new Galactic Security Forces. The Korthak leadership trial concluded yesterday, Dr. Vasquez replied. 3 individuals were found guilty of genocide and sentenced to life imprisonment. The rest of their species has been granted full amnesty and membership in the Federation. This had been humanity's most controversial decision. Instead of responding to the Council's planned genocide with genocide of their own, humans had chosen a different path. They offered every surviving species the same choice: join a new galactic government based on equality and mutual protection, or accept isolation but not extinction. Most species had chosen to join. Even many of the ancient council members, after seeing their military might eliminated and their power structures destroyed, had decided that cooperation was preferable to isolation. Only a handful of species had chosen to withdraw from galactic civilization entirely. High Counselor Vextar entered the chamber under guard, but not as a prisoner. The former leader of the Galactic Council had been convicted of crimes against sentient life, but had negotiated a deal to provide testimony about the Council's historical operations. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he now served as a historical consultant, helping the Federation understand the full scope of the previous government's crimes. "Vexatar," Sarah said as he approached her seat. "Do you have the report on the memorial project?" The Zephyrian nodded, his once confident bearing now subdued. "The initial survey has identified the homeworlds of 63 extinct species. We estimate it will take 50 years to properly document and memorialize all the civilizations the Council destroyed." This was another of humanity's initiatives that had surprised the galaxy. Instead of simply moving forward, humans had insisted on documenting every species the Council had eliminated. Memorial sites were being established on their former home worlds, and efforts were underway to preserve what remained of their cultures and technologies. The gentle singers have volunteered to compose memorial songs for each extinct species, Vextar continued. They say it will take them several centuries to complete the project, but they consider it a sacred duty. Sarah felt a mixture of sadness and determination. The galaxy would never forget the price of the Council's reign, and the new Federation would be structured to ensure such atrocities could never happen again. "What's the status of the exploration initiatives?" she asked Admiral Chen. "Remarkable," he replied with enthusiasm. "Now that species don't have to hide from the Council, we're discovering new civilizations every week. The galaxy is far more populated than we ever imagined. Current estimates suggest there may be over 1,000 intelligent species in our local cluster alone." This had been one of the most shocking revelations of the post-Council era. Hundreds of species had been living in hiding, afraid to develop advanced technology or expand beyond their home systems, because they knew it would attract the Council's attention. With the threat eliminated, the galaxy was experiencing an explosion of contact and cooperation between civilizations. The technology sharing agreements are progressing well too, added Dr. Vasquez. The crystalline confederations, computing systems combined with depth-folk environmental technology have already solved the terraforming challenges on 17 worlds. Sarah smiled at this news. Unlike the Council's one-way harvesting of innovations, the Federation encouraged genuine collaboration between species. Technologies were shared freely, with each contributing civilization receiving credit and compensation for their contributions. A chime indicated that the morning session was about to begin. Sarah took her position at the center of the chamber, not as a supreme leader but as the rotating chair of the Federation Assembly. Leadership positions in the new government changed regularly among different species to prevent any single group from gaining permanent control. "The Federation Assembly will now come to order," Sarah announced. "Today's primary agenda is the application for membership from the Helix Nebula colonies and the proposal for establishing the Galactic Research Cooperative." As the representatives began their discussions, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that terrifying day when she learned of humanity's planned extinction. The galaxy that had once been controlled by ancient predators was now home to a thriving community of equals. The irony wasn't lost on her that humanity's greatest weakness, their tendency toward suspicion and preparation for conflict, had become their ultimate strength. While other species had trusted the Council and paid with their lives, humans had quietly prepared for betrayal. Commander Chen called Representative Thys from the reformed Korthak Assembly. The research proposal includes establishing facilities to study the quantum disruption technology. How does humanity feel about sharing these specifications? This was the question Sarah had been expecting. Humanity's secret weapons had saved not just their own species, but potentially hundreds of others who would have eventually fallen victim to the Council's harvesting operations. Now the galaxy wanted to understand how the technology worked. The quantum disruption specifications will be shared with all Federation members, Sarah replied. However, the technology will only be produced under international oversight and will be restricted to defensive applications. This decision had required months of debate within Earth's government. Some argued that keeping the technology secret would ensure humanity's continued security. Others pointed out that the greatest strength of the new Federation was its commitment to transparency and equality. In the end, they had chosen to trust their new allies while implementing safeguards to prevent the technology from being used for aggression. The Gentle Singers have composed a song for this moment, announced their representative, a being whose crystalline body created musical tones when it moved. It tells the story of how the galaxy's youngest species taught the oldest species about the importance of hope. As the alien music filled the chamber, Sarah thought about Dr. Park and his team on Kepler 442b, still working to document the crimes of the old council. She thought about President Martinez and the difficult decision to activate Broken Arrow. Most of all, she thought about the billions of humans living throughout the galaxy who had been saved by humanity's refusal to be naive about the universe's true nature. The Council had made one critical mistake in their million-year reign of terror. They had assumed that all species would follow the same pattern: trust, integration, exploitation, and elimination. But humanity had experienced too much of their own history to trust completely. They had prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. Representative Chen called a delegate from one of the newly discovered species. "My people have a question about the Federation's expansion policies. How do we prevent this new government from eventually becoming corrupt like the old council?" Sarah considered the question carefully. It was something that kept many Federation leaders awake at night. The fear that they might eventually become the very thing they had destroyed. "We prevent corruption through constant vigilance and regular change," she replied. "No species holds power permanently. No technology remains secret indefinitely. And most importantly, we remember the price of forgetting that power corrupts those who hold it too long." The session continued with debates about trade agreements, research initiatives, and cultural exchange programs. It wasn't perfect, no government ever was, but it was honest. For the first time in galactic history, species could participate in civilization without fear that their contributions would be stolen and their populations eliminated.